everybody, and welcome to my show, Around the House with Steve O'Brien. This is a new show, and we're going to run a few segments, and we're going to start out today in the shop. I'm a carpenter, finished carpenter, cabinet maker, woodworker. I've been in this business for close to 40 years. This is all I've ever done. Many aspects of the building industry I've been involved in. We do home repair. I've owned a home for 30 years, so I've done many projects around the house, tile replacement, windows, doors, plumbing, electrical. So we are pretty well rounded in a lot of aspects of home improvement. Woodworking is my specialty. My company name is Finished Dimensions, and we've been in business on our own for about 15 years. We do a lot of cabinet making, custom cabinet making, interior finish carpentry, things of that nature. But we're going to walk you through today some of the basic safety principles that are very important when you're working around the shop. Count how many fingers I have. 10 fingers. At the end of the day, that's what you want to see. That's the number one rule, safety. And what I can't stress enough, a lot of these home improvement stores sell all kinds of power tools, you name it, shop power tools, powerful tools, and they will take your finger off in the blink of an eye. So you have to give power tools the utmost respect. And today we're going to just touch on a little bit of what safety you need to do in the shop. There are many safety things to do with and scaffolding, things of that nature. But we'll just today, and during the show at certain points we will interject our email. You can send us a question, maybe a safety question you might have, and hopefully we can answer some of your questions. But we're here to try to help homeowners work around the house in a safe manner and to get things accomplished. Today, with the prices, the economy, everybody's trying to save some money, and we're here to help you with that, and more so than ever, to be safe about it. So let's go now, and we'll start with some of the basic stuff. Now, first of all, one of the things I want to stress, the first thing, okay, right here, these, very important, ear protection, okay? Number two, any power tool, right here, number two, safety goggles. Very important. Safety goggles, hearing protection. Those are the two basics. Not expensive, but you should have a set of these in your shop. Get a couple of pair. Have them handy when you're doing work. So we'll start out on the table saw today, and we'll go to a couple of different basic things of safety with the table saw, and then we'll go on to a few more little small tips in the shop from there. We're at the table saw, and the table saw is probably the most important tool in the shop. Table saws come in a variety of sizes, horsepowers. This just happens to be a cabinet saw. It's very powerful, but there's many sizes. You can buy portable saws. I also have a portable table saw that I use on the job site if I go to a job site, and it's pretty powerful, not as powerful as this, but it will still do some damage. So you have to keep that in mind with a table saw. Regardless of its size, it's a power tool, and it will cut your finger off regardless of how big it is. So let's get started. First thing, there's multiple things we can start with on safety for the table saw. The first thing, and I think the most important thing, is anytime you're changing a blade, even vacuuming out from underneath with a shop vac to clean the sawdust out, here we go. Unplug the cord. And I can't stress that enough to people. Always be aware, even though the saw is off, if you have your hands around the blade, anything can happen. A mechanical malfunction, electrical malfunction, and that blade could start up and take your arm off. Always take the plug out, and then you're sure nothing's going to happen. So that's number one. Always unplug your power tools, regardless whether it's a table saw, skill saw, router, miter saw, whenever you're changing a blade, unplug it. That's very simple. Okay, now let's get started. Now, first thing I want to stress is one of these. Every shop should have one. This is a push stick, okay? And the push stick is for when you're running narrow pieces of wood, and I'll demonstrate. A piece of wood about that width, and you're running it between the fence and the blade, like so. And I will just show you how, if this saw was running and my fingers were pushing it through, that's pretty scary. I'm a seasoned pro, and I wouldn't even chance that. Always have a push stick for this occasion, that when you get to a piece like this, you get to a certain point near the end, you position the push stick, and there you go. Make sure your saw blade's down enough so you don't take off your knuckles. You don't need the saw blade up too high. When you're ripping stock, this basic 3/4 inch stock like we have here, bring your saw blade down just about to clear the top of the stock. That way, when you're pushing it through, you're not going to cut off the tips of your knuckles. If the saw blade's up too high, there's no need of it. And what happens too, when your saw blade's too high, you get excessive heat buildup from the blade against the material, and you'll burn your stock. You'll get brown marks where the saw blade heated up. So minimum saw blade for whatever you need. So there's my number one tip. And when you make a push stick like this, I used 1/2 inch plywood. Plywood is the best thing to use, because if you made it out of a piece of pine, and you do the same thing with a piece of pine, there's a chance that the handle could crack and break off, and your hand could go into the saw. If you make it out of plywood, it's never going to break because of the veneers of the plywood. So I always use plywood for a push stick. You can buy them from the store. They make them out of plastic. But if you're looking for a little project around the house on the weekend, you got nothing to do, make yourself make a bunch of them. Make 2 or 3 or 4. I hang them up near the saw. I put them down near where I'm working. And that brings me up to another point. The table saw bench should be clean. When you're working on a project and you have all kinds of material around you and things near the saw blade, it can be distracting, and it can also be dangerous. So try to keep your saw table pretty clean. I can't put things in the way too much, because then you get disoriented of what you're doing. So pay attention to what's on the saw table. Okay, we're going to do something here now I want to show people too. And this is another thing that I want to stress to people. I'm going to lower the saw blade just a bit, just to simulate if you were doing a dado cut. This is what to do. Your dado cut for a shelf. Let's not forget the eye protection. Now, as you can see, I didn't cut through the top of the wood. I just put a groove in it, a kerf. That can be dangerous, because when you're running the stock through the material, like so, you don't see the saw blade. So you have to be alert as to where the blade is going to be when you pass through, that your thumb could be over the edge right where the saw blade is, and that wouldn't be good. So keep that in mind when you're running a piece of stock through the saw. Be aware where the blade is in relation to the wood you're passing through. So that's some of the basic tips on a table saw. There's many, many more. We don't have the time in the day to talk about it, but we can always talk about it in a future show. Or if you have any questions, feel free to send it to my email, and we can handle those questions. But we'll be going to another saw right after this and talk about that. We're at another saw that we have in the shop here. We just got through with the table saw. And another very important tool in the shop or out in the field that is very, very important is the miter saw. There's different types, again, like many tools, they come in different powers, sizes. This is a 10-inch saw, and it's what they call a compound miter saw. Years ago, they just had a basic miter saw, which would do a 45-degree angle, and that was it. This saw is very functional. It can do compound miters, and it's very handy when doing crown moldings, any kind of molding that is on an angle. And so we're going to go over a few things with this saw that I think are really important. When you cut with this saw, I will explain one of the most important things that I've learned, and I've had a few close calls, and that's enough to show you that the saw is extremely dangerous if you're not careful. So first of all, I'm going to make a cross cut in this piece of plywood, and I'm going to show you the proper way to pass the saw through a piece of material and to stop the saw. What we want to do is we always want to start the saw in a fully extended position beyond the material, and then move the saw back into the material. Don't bring the saw up until the saw blade stops. Very important. What happens if you bring the saw blade up too fast and it hasn't stopped, sometimes it will catch the material and kick it out. So you could ruin your work, and you could also cause some damage to yourself. So I'm going to show you the technique that I use. So that was pretty simple. Now, what happens is a lot of times people they'll be rushing, they'll be in a hurry, and they won't wait for the saw to stop. I mean, you can get away with it, but there's going to be that one time you're going to catch the edge of the stock, and it's going to kick the saw right up out of your hand, and you'll realize how powerful this tool is when that happens. Hopefully you won't hurt yourself. There's a few other things I want to talk about with this type of saw. Now, there's multiple angles. We can angle the saw with a lever in the back. We can make a 45 on a compound. All kinds of really cool stuff you can do with this tool. And it's very handy to have a tool like this. Maybe not as big as this around the house. You really don't need something this large if you're doing minor home improvement, stuff like that. But it's a very handy tool nowadays around the home. Now, one other thing I really want to stress around any power tool, not just this tool or the table saw that we talked about earlier, is when you're working around any power tool, whether it be a saw, a drill, a router, always wear short sleeves or have your shirts tucked in. If you have long hair, pin it back. Any neckties, I don't know anybody who would work in a shop with a necktie, but you never know. But anything that can get caught in the blade or around a drill bit, it can pull you into a tool in a split second. So again, a quick thing on this saw, and then we'll wrap it up on this saw. When you're doing a small cut, a little thin piece like this, don't always put something behind it, a backer like that, because if you don't, when you cut this little piece, usually 9 times out of 10, the piece will fly off, and it can take out an eye or it can go through a window. So I always put a backer behind it, and that keeps that piece from flying and hitting, maybe breaking a light or going through a window, something like that. So there's a couple of quick little tips on the miter saw. So I hope that helps somebody with a little bit of things they might have going around down in the shop. Just be careful with that saw too. It's very powerful. And just a quick reminder for you folks out there, you're watching Around the House with Steve O'Brien. I'm your host, Steve O'Brien, and we're here talking shop safety today. Today we're talking power tools, skill saws, table saws, you name it. We'll try to cover as much as we can, and please feel free to contact me at finisheddimensions@yahoo.com if you have any questions, comments, maybe some tips you'd like to share with some of our viewers. We'd be more than happy to put those in our file, and we'll use them on an up-and-coming show. So feel free to email me with any comments, anything you might want to hear about on an up-and-coming show, and we'd love to hear from you. And now we're going to go into this tool. This is a Sawzall, and this tool is readily available to anybody. And it's a pretty versatile tool, and it can also be pretty dangerous in we should say, the wrong hands. You can do a lot of damage with a saw like this. And one thing, I've had some close calls myself. One thing that scares me with a saw like this is cutting through wires, more so than pipes. I mean, you cut through a pipe, you know, you get a leak, it might be a vent pipe, you can fix that. A wire, you can cut through a wire, depending on the voltage, you can cause a fire, you can be electrocuted, so you can get into some pretty dangerous stuff with one of these. Now, one of the techniques, if you see a wall like this, and you say you want to put a window in, or you want to put an opening in this wall, we'll say. First thing to do is, if you can do some homework, look upstairs, look down below, if there's a toilet above, figure out where that stack pipe comes down for the toilet. You can use a stud finder, what it will do is shows the density of the wall cavity. And if you go from stud to stud, and you find there is something in the middle there, chances are it's a pipe. But if you're pretty sure there's nothing there, and you're going to go for it anyways, put a long blade in your Sawzall like this, okay? And when you put your Sawzall against the drywall, put it at a sharp angle like I have it here. And now cut through at an angle like this versus straight through like this. At an angle like this, you can cut through a 1/2 inch drywall and not touch the studs. You'll touch the studs, but you won't cut through the studs. And do it all the way around where you want to cut your square out. Or you can do a small opening. Then you can look in and see if there's any wires, any pipes. Now we'll show you on the back side what I was just explaining. We have a cutaway view on the back of this wall that will pretty much show you what I mean. Now, on the back of this wall, typically this would be drywalled also. You wouldn't see this. But we took it off to show you, this is common inside wall studs, wall cavities. You have electrical wires like this. Sometimes you have a lot more wires than this. This is just one wire. And if you cut through one of these wires with this, it's not going to be a very good day. So I can't stress enough, with this tool, if you're cutting through a wall, number one, be careful of wires, plumbing pipes, or any other utilities that might be in the wall cavity. And number two, when you're cutting a wall, you've got to be very careful it's not a bearing wall. And when I say bearing wall, what I mean is it's carrying a load from up above. Because what will happen is you'll cut through that last stud, the blade will pinch. And when the blade pinches, you can't get the blade out of the cut. That tells you the weight traveled down on top of the blade, you've got a problem. Stop right there, put some studs in there, re-shore that wall up, start over, find another wall to cut. So this tool is very versatile, it's very handy. You can put metal cutting blades, I've got the whole kit, metal cutting, wood cutting blades. This one will cut through nails, it cuts through obviously wood, drywall. The only problem with this type of blade is it's very long, and if you use a long blade, just make sure you know what's in the wall. That I can't stress that enough. And also that it's not a bearing wall. Bearing walls, they hold up a lot of weight, and you can do some structural damage. So just do your homework when you're going to use one of these, and you should be fine. Now today we've been talking about power tool safety in the shop, and one of the other tools that a lot of people do own, and it's very commonly used, is a skill saw. Typical skill saw, 7 1/4 inch blade. Everybody has one, and this tool is used very widely in the home. It's a basic tool. If you own nothing else, this would be the tool to buy. But it does come with its safety issues. And one of the things I want to discuss today that I've had some close calls with, and I'll pass it on to you. The first thing you want to do, if we're cutting a piece of, we'll use a 1/2 inch piece of plywood as a demonstration. First thing you want to do, lift your guard up and set your saw set your saw blade so you don't want your blade down that far. You want your blade up just about right where the bottom of the plywood is, and that will be right about there. So you don't want to be down too deep, because sometimes you'll cut your sawhorses in half, and that would be a little embarrassing. So now what I want to show you today, what we're going to do is I'm going to draw a straight line on this piece of plywood, which would indicate a rip. Rip means we go lengthwise on a sheet of plywood. Now, one of the most dangerous things I've seen happen, and I've done it myself, so I've learned firsthand, and I talked about this on another show, but we'll go into that later. When you're plunge cutting into a slot, you're going to make a slot, or even if you're starting from the end, more so when you're plunge cutting in the middle of a sheet, what you have to do, and I'm going to demonstrate, is always keep the saw moving forward, never back up. When you back a saw up, it's most likely going to kick out of the material. You could damage your piece of material you're working on, and you could most likely cause some physical injury. So I'm going to show you the proper way when we're going to cut. If we had to cut, I'll demonstrate. If we had to cut, make a cut 24 inches in this piece. We had to stop here, and we have to get to this point. We don't back up to this point. You can start in the middle if you want. I'll show you. And you plunge cut, take your time and go slow. Safety goggles. Pick the guard up with your thumb, hold it up with your hand like so. Go in very slow, start the saw. Now you see I let the saw stop before moving it from the material. Let the saw stop. Just like I told you with the miter saw, let the saw blade come to a complete stop before you take the saw out. Now, remember our mark is back here, but we're short of the mark. We still have to go about 4 inches to get to this point here. You never back a saw up while it's running. It comes flying out. Turn the saw around now and go back to that mark, but you're always pushing forward. Never go backwards. And I'll finish the cut and show you what I mean. And there you have it. And that's the way you make a proper rip. Never back a saw up. Now, I want to show you one more tip with the skill saw, which is very important. It seems very simple, but you'd be surprised how many people can forget, especially when you're in a hurry. And that's the biggest thing, is learn to slow down, take your time. If you have all your fingers at the end of the day, that's a good thing. All right, now, what I'm going to do, and I don't have to set up the way I normally would, but I'm going to try to demonstrate as best I can. When you're making a cross cut, especially on a small piece like this, always put something under your work. Now I'll show you. If I was to cut this across, it would fold down and it could get hurt. Put something under your stock like this, and then now your stock is supported. And I'll show you what I mean. We'll cross cut right through it. There you go. So if I didn't have that underneath, what would have happened is obviously the wood would have just went like that, and that wouldn't be a good thing. So when you do any kind of cutting with a skill saw, just think ahead a little bit, and just, like I said, put a nice bench under your work. I only had one 2x4 to show you today, but I normally have 3 or 4 2x4s, and you can even secure them if you're going to be working on it on the bench all day. I put some wood screws in. Countersink the wood screws pretty good too, because if you don't countersink the wood screws, with my luck, what I always do is I always hit them with the skill saw, back to the store for a new blade. So if you're going to put any screws in your support, make sure they're out of the way of the saw blade. That's another reason why we set the saw blade to the thickness of the material so we don't go down too far. When you put a bench together and you screw the supports down, just make sure all your screws, nails, anything you use are down far enough that your saw blade is not going to come in contact with them. And that bench, you can keep that for however long your project might be. So make it sturdy, and just make sure that it's well supported. And anything you use on that, you can cut and keep it clean. Keep all the scraps and everything like we talked about earlier. Keep the bench as clean as you can, and then you'll have a much easier work surface to work on, and it'll work out really nice for you. So just remember that. Keep the work surface clean, keep the screws out of the way of the saw blade, and set your saw to the proper depth of the wood you're cutting, and that should cover you. I want to thank you for tuning in today for our first episode of Around the House with Steve O'Brien. I'm Steve O'Brien, and I will be more than happy to answer any questions relating to today's show or any future shows you might want us to talk about. My email is finisheddimensions@yahoo.com, or you can visit my website and see what we do here, www.finisheddimensions.com. And we try to help with safety, and in up-and-coming shows we'll do some woodworking projects. We'll be maybe on the job site, doing something out on the job site. But if you have anything you would like us to discuss, feel free to do that. Email me, or you can listen to my radio show, which airs on WXBR in downtown Brockton every Saturday from 11 to 12. Feel free to tune us in and hear what we have to talk about. So we have a lot to talk about, and we're going to cover a lot of stuff on the up-and-coming shows, and I hope you can tune in and see what we do, and maybe we can help you with a project around the house. So I really enjoyed today, and I want to thank everybody for being here today, and we hope to see you again in the near future. We're going to wrap it up for today, but we'll be back again. Hope you can tune in. Thank you very much. Have a safe day.
Don't walk, walk. Do not enter. Hot dogs. Definitely like hot dogs. Motorcycle club. Everything must go. Ghostly ghouls. Don't look at that, Teddy. Body piercing. Ouch.
Everyday moments can become teaching moments, because learning starts long before school does. Give your child the start they need at bornlearning.org.
There's something about you, baby. I can't get enough. There's something about you, baby. I got you looking at me, I'm gonna call you bluff. There's something about you.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Have you been a dad today?
Down to the morning light.
Mrs. Johnson, good to see you again. This is Mike. You can trust him. He looks just like you.
I'll be sucking up to you in order to make you sign the loan.
So, here are your low monthly payments and interest rate as we promised. Here's where they triple. The rest of this is really just here so that we get your house when you can't pay us back.
Such a lovely house.
Predatory lenders are never this easy to spot. Call us and protect yourself with the facts.
Passing gas around infants can be deadly. Passing gas releases a toxic fog of ammonia and hydrogen cyanide, which can be especially harmful on an infant's developing lungs. Passing gas can even contribute to sudden infant death syndrome. Kids shouldn't be exposed to secondhand smoke. Don't pass gas, take it outside.